Okay, we're starting. We're paid out. We're going to finish Halacha Gimel. Okay, we saw last time. The Ramah says at the end of the sif, he says it's mutter to pour water. You have water in a kli. The bugs that in there are mutter because the bugs grew in a kli. So it says you're mutter to pour that water from one kli to another kli, because when the bugs go, they go with their whole ribasaya, with their whole habitat goes with them. So as long as the bugs stay in their habitat, they're mutter, in their original habitat, they're mutter. So since it's not only mutter if they're in the original kli, you can pour it to another kli, and another kli, you can keep on pouring it from kli to kli, and it stays mutter as long as they travel with their whole habitat as a unit. Okay, as long as they keep on moving in their mutter. So the question is that the Ramah said in Halacha Aleph that a person is not there was bugs that grew in a bar, and the bugs in that bar are mutter also. So Ramah says, but you're only allowed to stick your head into the bar and drink, but you're not allowed to scoop water out and drink it out of the bar. So the question is, well, what's the difference from here? When you scoop the water out of the bar, you're also scooping it out the bar with the water. So over here, the Ramah says you're allowed to pour it from one kli to another kli because the water goes with it and it stays mutter. I mean, as long as the whole habitat goes with it, that's mutter. So what's the difference if you pour it or if you scoop it out? It's the same thing. What should be the difference between those two cases? So the Shach and Taz give different answers to this kasha. The Pri Megadim says each side doesn't agree with the other one. Okay, so they each one thinks that the other thing, they don't agree with each other. And we'll see enough practical nafkamina between these two. Practical nafkamina between these two pshat. The Shach says, which is really what the Beis Yosef says, the Shach brings for the Beis Yosef, the difference is like this. The only time the Ramah says that if it travels with its habitat, its mutter, is if it goes from two like kalim. It goes from a kli to a kli. If it would go from a bar to a bar. But if it goes from a bar to a kli, that doesn't work. Okay? When we say that it traveled with its habitat, that's only, I'm not exactly sure why it says they're rices. Right? We're talking about shilos of the rices. Yes, shilos of the rices. So well, it has to do with the drushes of the Gemara. Okay, to say that the water in its habitat is mutter. We're going to see next time that the water in the habitat is mutter. The inside of the kli is a special drush that's also considered part of its habitat. And when it moves from kli to kli, it stays mutter. It's still mutter. If it would move from a bar to a kli, it's not mutter. So therefore, the Ramah in Halacha Aleph was talking about you scooped water out of a bar. So it's going from a bar into a kli, that bug became usser. In other words, the habitat is over. It used to be in a bar habitat, water in a bar habitat, now it's water in a kli habitat. It's a new place. It's as if it's in a new spot. If it goes from a kli to a kli, if you keep pouring it from cup to cup, from one pot to another, from kli to kli is mutter, that's considered it moved, the ribasaya moved, it moved from a habitat in a kli to a habitat in a kli to a habitat in a kli, that keeps on being mutter, and it stays, the bug stays mutter. That's what the Shach says. The Taz says, no. Doesn't make a difference whether it goes in the same keli or not. What's the difference? A kli is a kli. If it goes from a kli to a bar, what's the difference? It's all the same. The difference is, in the case in the Ramah, in Halacha Gimel, the person is pouring the water. So when you pour the water, the bug and its water all transfer completely. As opposed to, in Halacha Aleph, you scooped it out. So it's possible that before the bug got into the cup, it was on the outside of the cup. When you think about it, if you scoop put a bucket down into a well, the bucket goes into the well first. The outside of the bucket goes in first. The bug could have touched the outside of the bucket. If he goes on the outside of the bucket, now he's out of a kli. That outside of the bucket is usher. Now the bug has walked on the ground. He's usher. So then when then he gets swallowed into the inside of the bucket. So he did. So the pshat is that in Halacha Aleph, he did leave his ribasai. He got onto the outside of the bucket.
To the water
right. It doesn't count. When it's on the outside. It's a suffix, yeah. Assuming that it did get to the outside, the bucket that you're lowering in is considered a separate kli. It's not part of the well. So if it touched the outside of that kli, it's also, as soon as the water all fills up the kli, now the inside of that kli, the bug is allowed to go onto it. If the bug goes onto that, it's still considered in its ribasayo. But if it goes on the outside of the kli is not the ribasayo, and that doesn't count.
Even though we're in the water.
Even though it's in the big water, you're saying.
It's in the water.
Right, even though it's in the water. Right. So that's what the Taz says. The Taz says it's a...
Unless you're worried that when you lift it up, and when it's out of the water, in between that there...
I don't think that's what he says, because... I don't remember. I don't think that's what he says, because that would be hard to imagine. How would it then get into the water? It crawled over the top.
Okay,
that would be the case, and you would just have a solution of just not to lift it out until it's filled up.
The water out.
No.
it's still.
But then it's not going to get into the
outside
kli.
lip.
No, you should take the kli,
Yeah.
put it in,
Yeah.
pick it up, and that's it. And anything, don't let what's on the outside get to go
Yeah,
from
but
the
you don't
inside.
know a little bug outside the lip could have crawled in afterwards once it's out.
Okay. He says both. Actually, he says both. Okay. Fine. So now, the Pri Megadim gives two nafkaminas between the shach and taz. Okay, two nafkaminas. First is simple as a bug was born in a kli. The shach will hold, and then you somehow, we'll see in a second, manage, and then you pour it from that kli into another kli. Okay, you pour it from
Kli A to Kli B.
right. You scooped out. Let's take it back. If you scooped out water from one kli into another kli, there was water, and the bug had been born in one kli, and you scooped out the water from that kli and took it into another kli. So according to the shach, that'll be mutter. It went from kli to kli. According to the taz, it'll be usher because you scooped it out, and once you scoop it out, that's what makes it usher. Okay, that's one nafkamina. And another is, what happens if the bug was born in a bar, and then you poured it out? I know this is going to sound strange. You poured it out from the bar into a kli. So if you poured it, not that you scooped it, you poured it from the bar into the kli. You're going to hear in a second.
You make a bar lower down, you make a hole in the bar and pour it directly.
Okay, good, fine, good example, fine. So then, if it poured, according to the taz, it's going to be mutter, because as long as you don't scoop it out, it's going to be mutter. According to the shach, it's going to be usher, because it went from a bar to a kli. As soon as it goes from a bar to a kli, it's not considered to be in its original habitat, it's now new, it's now a kli. It used to be a bar, and it'll become usher. Okay? So you're thinking, what kind of case is that? So David Abraham came up with a case, he made the whole, okay, what's the case? But, no, it really is a case. Okay? It makes a nafkamina. In Halacha Beis, we talked about the copepods in New York's water. Okay? There were those who held that the reservoir has the din of a bar. Okay? The reservoir has the din of a bar. And they held that therefore it's mutter, because it's a bar, it's charitz and eats, and then the bugs that grow in there are mutter. Okay? So that's fine if you want to go drink copepods in the reservoir, if you go swimming in there. But what does it help for people who, in their houses, as soon as you open the sink, you're taking the water out of the bar and putting it into your kli. So there's mamish a hole in the bar. That's right. It's a long hole. So it's mamish a case of the shach. It's mamish a case that the Pri Megadim says is the nafkamina, that if you have a bar and you get the water into a kli by pouring, according to the taz it'll be mutter. According to the shach, it would seem that it should be also. Okay, so what did they gain by telling us that the bugs are mutter because they were in a bar?
You transferred it.
Who cares? In the bar, maybe, let's say the reservoir has a din of a bar. It's chavitzim nitzim. Good, those on. But that's only mutter when it's in there. No one's drinking out of the reservoir. The people want to open up their sinks in the kitchen. As soon as they open the sink, it's going into a kli. When it goes into a kli, they're finished, and the water should be usher. Okay, so that's a question on the whole. It'll end up now that the water is machlok, the shach and taz. Okay, according to Taz, you can drink the water. According to Shach, you can't drink the water. Okay, so that's a question. I might have missed it. I did not see the Radowski's shur that he talks about this question. I'm sure maybe it's in there. I heard what he said the answers. I didn't hear from him. From others, I heard what he says the answers. Okay, but I don't see that he talks about it. He says like this: when the water comes out of the reservoir, the first thing that happens to it is it gets, basically, right away, it gets chlorinated. Okay? And the chlorine is what they believe kills all the copepods. Okay? They have never found, to my knowledge, live copepods in drinking water. Okay? There's loads of live ones in the reservoir. They never found live ones in the drinking water, and they believe it's the chlorine that kills them. So they chlorinate the water basically right when it comes out of the reservoir. So, therefore, the reason why the bugs are mutter even in your cup is because of svek. Safek, if there's a bug in my cup altogether. If there's a part of my cup altogether. Why is it a safek? Because it's only a miyad amatzi. It doesn't happen every cup. It's only a miyad amatzi. It's a safek if there's one in my cup altogether. Second is, we're going to see in Halacha Daled, there's a big shaila whether if a bug was left its habitat after it died. That's what this bug did. It died as soon as it left, as it was coming out of the bar. Before it got into the cup, it had already died. We're going to see in Halacha Daled there's a machlokes whether pirish mace is mutter or also. Whether that's considered that it was pirish. This bug was pirish after it died.
Yeah.
It was already dead when it was pirish. We're going to see a to-do about that in Halacha Daled, whether pirish mace is considered pirish or not. So it's a svek, a suffix if there's a bug in my cup. Suffolk, and even if there's bug in my cup, can't find the bug would not be usher because, even according to the Shach, it's a Shach if it would be usher, because it would be Pirish Mace, and Pirish Mace, we'll see in Hochdal, there's a big to-do what the din is about Pirish Mace.
Well, why are you assuming that according to the Shach, that this is the pipes are considered, because I'm getting in a cup.
I'm getting eventually into my cup.
And then you have a cup. It's not the pipes that's the problem.
No, not the pipe. It's a cup. Eventually, when I open the sink, it goes into something, into a pot, into a cup, into something. Unless you stick your mouth under and drink right out of it, it's going to be usher. Right? If you drink out of a water fountain, you'd be okay. You're going to drink out of a water fountain. But as soon as you put it into something else, you're... Yes.
This reservoir, is there also a filter in there in order to prevent any bugs to go through the water? Do they... I'm just...
There isn't a filter for bugs. There might be a filter to keep fish from going out. They do not...
That filter is not a fish.
There's no filter for... Right, there's no filter that keeps out bugs.
Okay, so just
But, no, there are plenty of bugs going through. The city admits there's plenty of bugs going through. It doesn't bother them. Okay. Now, I have to, just to finish off this part, I have to just tell you that if this is true, if this is what he held, and that's the Svek Sveka that he was going with, we'll see more about Svek Svekas in, I think, Halachos. I think Halachos, more about Svek Svekas. But if this is true, it's going to take away from one of the interesting points that Belsky makes in his Shulchan. Okay? After writing for many pages about why he thinks the bugs are mutter, we haven't touched most of it. We're going to get to that later. But most of it we haven't touched. But after writing for many pages, he says, so you'll tell me, what do I have to lose? I put the filter on anyhow. Big deal. Let me just put on the filter. What's the big deal? I can just filter my water. Why should I do it? So he comes up with a chap and he says, no, you're better off not filtering your water. Okay? So this is like wow, I'm going to get you. You're better off. And why? He says, the reason you're better off not filtering water is because in our halach it said that if you use a poor filter, in our case was talking, and the bugs get trapped on the top of the filter at night, you don't see them, then they fall into the water, then the bugs are usher, because they were pierced, they went onto the filter, and then they plopped into the water. He says, well, these bugs, they find, lo and behold, when you look at the filters, you don't find too many bugs on the filters. And what happens is because the bug gets caught in the filter, with time, the water pouring on it breaks it apart, and then these broken bugs make their way through the filter. I mean, the filter has a hole that's so big, so it holds back the bugs. As they break apart, they eventually make their way through the filter and into the water. Okay, now, so maybe Chatashir and the bottle because they're not barriers. And he says, well, all kinds of reasons why it's not really an issue. He says, but if you do it my way, you don't filter the water, you're drinking things that are completely mutter. If you put on the filter, then you're worse off because you're having bugs that are usher because once they got up to the top of the filter, they're usher. Now they're in a cleat. And once they get there, when the minute through, so there might be mutter because it's bottle, because it's sanitary, all kinds of cheshbonis. But when I said the bug that's usher is getting into you, so you're better off not filtering.
But if his cheshbon is Svek Sveka, like you're saying, then Svek Sveka works for that also.
That's my point. So my point is that if you're going to say that the answer, that was my point. If your answer to the last question was that it's a mutter because it's Svek Sveka, we have the same Svek Sveka over here. We have a suffix if it was purish mace, and it was a suffix if there's a mice.
Unless it's no.
So if the hester to drink the water without the filter is because of a Svek Sveka, suffix in my cup, suffix if it's purish mace, then we have the same Svek Sveka if I put the filter onto it. This chap, you're better off not filtering it because of that. That's exactly my point. Is that that pulled the rug out from his other point, which is that you're better off not filtering it. Okay,
so you don't understand what he's saying.
No. So that last point about you should not filter was like a very unusual, unexpected. No, it was like a curveball. Not only you don't have to be machmer, your words being machmer. That's great. So it's not, but so that like that surprised the curveball towards the end. At that point in the tshuva, it's like you weren't expecting it. Okay, so fine, let's go on. Now to clear up two other points here. The Machaber was talking about, it's really from the Gemara, about a person who was filtering with a filter that wasn't very good. Right, his filter was one that the bugs could fall through. And that was why we talked about day and night. It depends whether you're going to see it or you're not going to see it. So, of course, our din is talking about where you're filtering water that's the bugs in there are mutter. You're not filtering because you're trying to get rid of the bugs. You're filtering it in a place for whatever reason you have to keep fish out. I don't know, whatever you're doing, that's why you're filtering. You're not filtering it for the bugs because the bugs are mutter. Were it to be that the bugs were usher, if you were filtering this for some other reason because the bugs were usher, of course you couldn't use this filter. This is not a filter that qualifies to get bugs out. This is a filter for whatever reason you have. And we have an issue with the bugs going through. But the bugs really, this is not, if you needed a filter that would be better, if you needed a filter to get usher bugs out of it, you would need a better filter. Okay?
Right.
Why?
The other guys are going to, also the guy going to go through.
Right? If the holes are this big, are an inch across, it's not doing you any good. Obviously, the holes have to be so small. Okay, so now two things, which is one is, some people say there's a question whether whether you have to catch enough bugs in your filter to make sure that no bugs go through. I mean, you have a cup you have liquid with isser in it. Do you have to make sure there's no bugs that go through, or do you just have to get it down to below mir hamotzri? Okay. How many bugs do you have to go to filter out? Okay. We're going to get to Emir. I'm just telling you about that question now, but Emir it's for Halachos. Okay, we'll get to it over there. How much do you have to filter out? I hope we'll talk about it in Halachos. Do you have to get it down to below mir hamotzri, or do you have to get it down to 0? Okay. Second thing is, what happens if, listen to this situation, the guy had a very thick liquid, okay, and it was hard to filter it to we're going to see this later about honey, hard to filter it so fine that you got the bugs out, because it was viscous, the thing was viscous. So if you wanted to use a filter that was a little bit bigger, a little bit wider. So they came up with this chap. The bugs, and this is like measured in like microns, it's this long by this wide. So the hole in the filter, the space like between in the filters, is big enough that the only way the bug could get through is if it went through head first. Okay, but if he would be laying on his side, he couldn't possibly get through. Okay, theoretically he could get through. If he dived straight head through, he could fit in. But it's not big enough for him to fit through any other way other than that. Okay, and most people assumed over there that that was good enough. Okay, and that also has to do with svek. Okay, that's for a mitzvah malacha test about whether such a thing works. When you say svek in those kind of cases, because it's pretty unlikely the bug is going to get through. It's not for sure, but it's pretty unlikely that it's not. Because again, it could. It's physically possible for him to make it through if he goes through.
50-50 chance.
What is it?
Go sideways or go straight down.
Do you think he only has 2 ways to go? Well, I mean, it's that. If you drop the bug, there's all different. It goes this way and this way and this way. There's 100 different directions.
Go straight.
There's only 2 ways that it goes. It's not like it's a this or this. The bug can fly in any direction he wants to try to get through. He would have to fit just perfect to get through. Okay. Anyhow. Okay. Fine. Let's go on to our last thing, which is this is sort of not related, but a little related. Okay. There's 2 halachas about a barrier. Okay. We're really going to do most of the thing, I think, about barriers, and I think also an halacha test is going to be a really big halacha test. But one thing about it is there's 2 dinim about a barrier. 2 dinim that I know about a barrier. Okay. One is there's a special isser to eat an entire insect if it's a barrier. Okay. The Gemara Makkah says that if you really only over the law is only if you eat a kazayas, but if you eat a whole one, you're over even though it was not a kazayas. That's one thing. The second thing is
that's the rice, right?
That's the din the rice. The second. What do you say? Okay, wonderful. The second is the din. We have a din drabanan that a barrier can't be bought. Okay, that's a din. It's brought in Siman Kuf. Okay, that a barrier can't be bought. Okay, now in talking about the first question, which is eating an entire barrier, the Gemara Nazir has a suffix. When we say that a bug is considered a barrier, a bug, the Gemara says this. Does the definition of the word barrier mean a living thing, or does the definition of a barrier mean a complete thing? What's the difference? What would happen if a part broke off from the bug, but the part that broke off was not an Aruch hanishamah teluyah? Okay, it lost a foot. No, it lost a leg. Okay? So it lost the leg. If barrier means it's a living item, then this item is just as viable as it was beforehand. The fact that it's missing a leg didn't take it away from being living. It's still a living item that's considered a barrier. If barrier means a complete item, then it's not complete. It's missing a leg. Okay, that's a Gemara suffix in Nazir. Nun Aleph Amid Beis onto Nun Beis Amid Aleph. Okay, the Gemara has this shiloh what would be if you took off something not an Aruch hanishamah teluyah, but something else like that.
So wouldn't the nothing also be if it's dead? If it's whole but dead?
If it's whole but dead, that's a shiloh. Whether it's whole but dead, it's a question. I'm trying to remember who spoke about it. Whole but dead,
which is what we got, which is all over the place. We always say it's barrier. No. If it's whole but dead, no, it's still a barrier. I take that back. It's still a barrier. You don't have to only eat bugs when they're alive.
That's not a lot.
Something's funny about this.
Okay, so I'll have to think that through then. Okay, I think that what it means is that it's a. I'm not sure. I'm thinking about something else. There's a shiloh about whether. That's going to come later. I'm not sure. Okay. I know that what you're saying is not correct, but we'll have to think that through why that's not true. Okay, so the Gemara is not Pashat the Shiloh. The Gemara thinks it has an answer, the Gemara leaves it off without being Pashat the Shiloh. What is the definition of a burial? Now, before we go on, the Gemara talks about if it's missing. It doesn't say what it's missing, but everyone who talks about it uses it as if it's talking about it's missing a leg. Okay, I imagine, although I didn't see anybody say this in the favors, I imagine that if it's missing something that regenerates, like a piece of hair, okay, I don't know if bugs have hair, but if it has something that regenerates, I don't think that's even part of the shiloh, that should make it be considered not whole, because it doesn't take away from its completeness the fact that it's missing this thing. If it's missing a leg,
it's missing. Right now it's missing.
What is it missing? It's not missing anything. If it's not significant. No, if it's missing a leg, it's missing. But if it's missing a piece of hair, and it's going to regenerate. It's hard to believe that it's not even an aver. It's not anything.
Some lizards grow their tails back.
Right. So for those kind of things, if they grow back, I don't know. For that makes it not being considered.
Here's somebody grows back.
Is what? Because no, you get a haircut. It looks like you're missing something. Okay,
that's the difference. It grows, it comes over, and goes back around. So I told you that if you have a tail, it can grow back. It's not the difference. It loses its tail. It can grow it back.
So you see, so the lizard without a tail, maybe he's not a burial, but without the hair. Okay, so I'm not sure both these cases. But what I mean is when we're talking about that it's missing something, to me it sounded obvious that it means something that's not coming back, but something that's here that's mamish disposable. I mean, here is not supposed to stay there. That shouldn't take away from being a burial. That would seem to me that should make it. That shouldn't affect it. I didn't think we're talking about that. And for that matter, I guess you then have to become a big entomologist to know if it's missing antennas. Well, do antennas come back? I don't know. You have to know what you're talking about when it's missing a piece now. You know. Wireless. Yeah. Okay. So you have to. Okay. Anyhow. So the Gemara.
Why are you getting into this?
Just give me a second. The Gemara is talking about the first shiloh, that if you eat a whole bug, is it considered a whole bug? Is it considered what makes it we cannot consider you ate a whole bug? Okay. The Rishonim in Siman Kuf, I mean they're not in Siman Kuf, but they're brought in Siman Kuf, say the same shiloh of the Gemara is negea, not just if you eat a whole burial, but the din of burial being bottled is totally in the same shiloh. That Gemara in Nazir, that's Mesupik, what's a burial in Indian if you eat a whole burial, is the same shiloh would be if you want to say a burial being bottled. Yeah. For a burial to not be bottled, does it have to not be complete, or does it have to not be, or does it have to be missing an aver hanishamah teluyah? That's what it's a deal over there. And the Shach says over there that since it's a burial not being bottled, it's a din d'rabbanan. Since burial of potatoes is a din d'rabbanan, therefore shabbat d'rabbanan l'kula. The Gemara was not pushed the shiloh, and therefore we say shabbat d'rabbanan l'kula, and therefore, which is what we're used to, that to make something not a burial, it just has to be missing any meaningful part. If it's missing a foot, it's not a burial, even though it could live just fine without a foot. Okay, we're making on this shiloh, and we consider something to be not a burial, even if it's not missing a davar shana shabbat teluyah. Okay, related question to that is the Beis Yosef brings a Hagoy Sharidura, who's talking about fish actually, and he says if you cook a fish, and the fish, if I get it correctly, I don't think it's missing a piece, but it shrank. Okay, it got smaller. Maybe pieces are dissolving. Not shrinking. It's dissolving as it cooks, and that's the normal part of cooking, that those parts break apart. He says it's still considered a burial because that's part of cooking. I'm not exactly sure what he's trying to say. He says it's just part of the cooking, so it's whole, because I guess whole cooked fish are supposed to be like this. I mean,
whole. Was a tray of fish when you were cooking it. That's the case.
Well, it's a shadow being a burial being bottled, so I guess it's a full fish that was a tray fish, and you cooked it, So I guess the point is that the whole live fish are supposed to look like this, and whole cooked fish are supposed to look like this. They're complete, because even though they're missing that little bit, it's still somehow it's complete. Okay, so if that would be true, then what would happen is if we would cook a bug, if we'd have a bug that was cooked and it lost a part, we're going to see. Guess we're in Halachos. There's a nafkamina. If it loses parts when it's being cooked, it may be not considered a burial. If, according to Zagar Shardu, we would maybe have to say, if the parts would be typical to fall off during cooking, I'm not sure what that means. I don't think people usually cook them. If it's typical to fall off, maybe it wouldn't be, that would make it would still be a burial, even though it lost its part, okay, which will have ramifications for Halachos. So, I'd have to just tell you that the Beis Yosef doesn't make anybody who's cholok on the Zagar Shardu, but the Magen Avraham in Hilchos Brachos says that what the Hagoy Sharidura says is really a Machlokes Rishonim. It's a Machlokes Rishonim about this thing that he's saying. According to the way the Magen Avraham lays out the Machlokes Rishonim, the Mishnah Berurah says, well, go look at the Ramah on that halacha, and the Ramah is being makel, not like this Agar Sharadura. Okay, he's not talking about Agar Sharadura altogether, but the machlokes we're showing that the Magen Avraham connects it to is a machlokes that the Ramah is makel about in Hilchos Brachos, and therefore the Mishnah Berurah says you could be makel in Hilchos Brachos about this machlokes, and the Chachmas Adam and the Binas Adam says. As far as bittul of a barrier, the same thing also, that if it loses a leg or some other body part while you're cooking it, that's fine, it's still considered not a barrier. We don't say like Agar Sharadura that it has to lose something in, so to speak, in an unusual way. Okay? And he says that even if it loses as part of the normal, usual cooking processes, that's also considered that it's not a barrier.